Okay, Be'ezus Hashem. Today's daf is Masechta Kedushin Be'ezus Hashem Daf Yud Ches 18, and we're going to start from with again. The conversation is what's the doing with an Eved Ivri. An Eved Ivri again is you purchase an Eved Ivri. It's like buying a long-term employee, but you paid for it in advance. You paid 6 years in advance for his service. We also learned that maybe in some we consider it like as if you own his body, but basically you bought an Eved Ivri. So Tan Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Eved Ivri, if Eved Ivri was purchased and the master that purchased him died. So the Brisa says, Oived es haben, he goes to, his next job is he gets passed down to the son of the master, the Eino Oived es habas, but he doesn't work for the daughter. So if the man did not leave over any boys and just girls, so his Eved Ivri goes free. Amma Avriya, but if a man bought Amma Avriya, like he bought an 8-year-old girl as a maid, right? So again, then when he dies, Eina Evedes, she doesn't go to service, Lo Yeseben V'Lo Yesabas, she doesn't work for the son anymore, not for the daughter. That's it. She goes free. Hanirtza, someone who got his ears pierced because he wanted to stay on longer, or the Hanimkar Lagoy, a Yiddish guy sold himself to a goy as an Eved. So then what happens when the goy dies or when the master dies? So a regular Eved Ivri, a Jewish master, we said before you serve for the son, but that's only if he's a regular Eved Ivri. If he stayed his term out and then he got his ears pierced, so the Brisa says, Ein Oived lo ben lo bas, you don't work for anybody anymore. You go free, not the son, not the daughter. So let's examine this. Amamar, we learned in the Brisa, Eved Ivri Oived es ben, Ein Oived es bas. How do you know that when the master dies, the rights only gets transferred to the boy, but if there is no boys, then in just the girls, then the Eved goes free. How do I know that? The Tanur Rabbanan, the rabbis taught, Torah says that if a man, a Jewish man, sells himself to you, the term that he works for you, notice the chaf, he works for you is shei shanim. L'cha, he only works for you, and does not work for any of the inheritors, daughter, or even, let's say, man has no daughters, no boys, no children, but he will not go now serve the brother of the master. No yarshim. He goes free. Maybe the Torah is even excluding that when the master dies, he doesn't even have to work for the son anymore. So the Gemara says, the Torah says that he has to stay a 6-year term. It doesn't matter if the Adon is around or not. So it must mean that he is working for the son when the master dies. So how do I keep the pasuk that he works for you? To you, not to the inheritors. Inheritors meaning that if there is no son, this Eved Ivri will not work now for the daughter, or if there is no daughter and no sons, he will not work for the brother of the master. So the Gemara says, why do I include the son that takes over the father's position, but not the brother? So the Gemara answers, Meraba ani es haben, I include the ben, sheken kom tachas oven, because we see that the son takes over after the father passes, liya'ada. Ya'ada means that for an Amavriya, we find that when you buy an Amma Avriya, an 8-year-old girl to work for you, the Torah really demands that you should marry that girl. And the Torah says that if you don't want to marry her, your son should marry her. So we see that the son takes over, steps in where the father steps away. So we see that the son is something. And in the context of steachuza, another idea, I'm not going to discuss that, it has to do with buying a property, and if it goes free by yovel, we see that the son takes over the father. So therefore, I want to include the son, that when the Eved Ivri dies, he works for the son. So the Gemara says, Adarabah, just the opposite. I'm going to include that the brother should take over for that master. We find that a brother will step in to take over his deceased brother's wife in the context of Yibam. So we see a replacement for a person could be his brother. So the Gemara says, Klum yesh Yibam el b'mokum shein ben, ho yesh ben ein Yibam. The whole point of Yibam only if there's no boy. So, but if there was a boy, there is no Yibam. So that's what the Gemara says. Therefore, it's not really that the brother is taking over. It's only because there is no son. That's why the brother is taking over. Because of that, therefore, the main person that takes over a father is his son. So the Gemara just wants to just clarify, why do we have to come up with that idea and say that the whole Yibam is not really a taking over? Because you had this question, that's why Yibam is not considered an act of a brother taking over for a brother. If you didn't have this question, you would say that the brother is better than a son. But typically, let us prove the hacha over here by a son tarte. You have two concepts in the Torah where the Torah says the son takes over the father, by yi'ud and also by stei achuza. V'hacha over here, chada, and over here the brother taking over is only by one situation in the Torah, which is by yibam. So without that, you would still give the win to the son over the father, over the brother. And says the Gemara, no. The whole stei achuza, that concept where we say the son is as if it's the father, that only is learned out because it doesn't really say over there that the son takes over. It has a limud because we would think that the brother should take over, and there we say no, but that by Yibam it's not really the brother taking over. It's only because there is no son. So stei achuza wasn't really a clear-cut case where the Torah clearly says that the son takes over. So basically, if it wasn't for that pircha, you'd have 1 versus 1. So you wouldn't know if you give more power to the son or to the brother. The bottom line to walk away is when an Eved Ivri's master dies, if there's a boy, if there's a son, then he has to work for that son. If there is no son, he goes free. But if an 8-year-old girl who's a maid, if her master dies, she goes free. How do you know that? The Torah says that the Amavriya is like the Nirtza type of Eved. And Nirtza doesn't work for the son or the daughter. We'll see that later. El Mavriya goes free when the master dies. Says Gemara, does that teach you that the Amavriya goes free? I need it for another teaching. That for an Amavriya, you also have to give gifts. That's what the Chumash is saying. To just like an Eved Ivri that goes free, you give gifts. So to Amavriya, a girl that goes free, you have to give gifts. Don't think that it means that you also drill. If the girl wants to stay longer, she gets the right to get her ears pierced and can stay longer. No, because the Chumash says that only an Eved has this right to say that he wants to stay longer. A man, but not a girl slave. So what does it mean when the Torah says, do to an Amma like you're doing to an Eved Ivri? Teaching you that you give gifts. When an Amavriya leaves, you give gifts just like you would give gifts to an Eved Ivri that leaves. So, to give gifts. So how can you teach me? Al-Mascha already teaches you something. So how do you know it teaches you that Amavriya is like a Nirtza that would not work for the Ben or the Bas? Answer the Gemara, in came, Nichtov Kra, La Mascha came. My Tasa came. Why does the Torah add in the word Tasa? Do the same exact. Shram Mina Tarte, we learn 2 things that an Amavriya is like an Eved Ivri. One thing is that she gets gifts like an Eved Ivri when she leaves. And the other thing is that she's partially like an Eved Ivri that had his ears pierced. That once the master dies, she doesn't work for the son, the daughter, she goes free. Now, how do you know a Nirtza goes free? The Ksiv, when you get your ears pierced, you work for that master forever. So it's darshka if you only work for that master as long as he's alive. But if he dies, then you go free. And if someone's sold to a guy and the guy died, how do you know that? The Torah says that if the guy who sells himself to a guy wants to buy himself back, he should make the reckoning and make up a price with the person that purchased him. So the Torah stresses that the only negotiations are between the Eved Ivri and the guy that purchased him, but not with the Yorshe guy. The Yorshim of the guy when he dies, don't take over the rights to this Eved Ivri, and therefore the Eved Ivri would go free. Again, obviously, this is talking about a situation where the guy is living in the land of Israel and follows Jewish law. So if he purchased an Eved Ivri, the Eved Ivri has a right to buy himself back. But if the guy dies, the Eved Ivri will go free and will not start working for the son. Amar Rava commented on this, bunch of halachas. Devar Torah, min ha-Torah, goy yorishes aviv, a guy could inherit his father. In other words, a guy has a rich father, and that rich father died. The guy can inherit his father. It's not a Jewish idea. Since the Torah said a special limitation by an Eved Ivri, the Eved Ivri will not work for the son of the guy, the Yerush of the guy. So it must be that in other matters, other transfer of wealth, the guy, when he dies, the Yerushim inherit the wealth, and that's a Torah idea. Now a new thing, ger as a goy, ain't a divrei Torah, el divrei sefer. Wow, a ger. Let's say a goy turned into a ger. Now a gershin is gayer. He's like a brand new person. So if his father, the goy, passed away, he doesn't inherit him. Not mid divrei Torah, not mid divrei sefer. The Tanam we learned in the Mishnah, ger v'goy shiyorses aviyam goy. A ger and a goy that inherited their father as a goy. So here the key: a ger that inherited his father. Now a goy probably has things that are not permitted for a Jewish person. He probably has a avodah zarah, or he has yayin nesach. So, and therefore, a ger, now being a Jew, cannot benefit from that yayin nesach. Ger yochel legoy, the ger could tell the guy, tulat avodah zarah, you take the avodah zarah of our dad, I'll take the money value. Tulat the yayin nesach, you could take the yayin nesach, v'ani peiros, and I could take the fruits. But mishaboler ger, once they divided it up, they can't transfer and trade. Osir, because basically the ger, who's a Jew, will now be trading his yayin nesach for something that he could benefit from. But once you own yayin nesach, you cannot benefit from it. So therefore, it would be osir. Now, if you want to say that when a guy dies, his son, the ger, inherits min ha-Torah, even before the ger took over the rights to the property of his father, the guy, he should not be allowed to barter with his brother, because kishakel, when he's going to barter with his brother, he's exchanging what he owes to something that's avodah zarah, and therefore you're not allowed to change something that you own that's avodah zarah and change it for money. So because of that, it must be that the ger, when his father died, the goy died, he's inheriting min divrei sofrim. It's only midrabanan. So really, it's not his. And as long as they didn't divide up the money, he could say, "Don't give me anything. My brother guy, you take all the yayin nesach, avodah zarah, and just write me a check from the estate." Elam Rabbanan. Now, why did the Rabbanan say that a ger could inherit his rich father, the guy? Because if really a gershon is gayer, is kakatan shenoiladame, so he should not have any rights to his father's assets. He's a brand new person. But if you're going to tell him that, so if his rich father dies and all the wealth will go to his brother, he's going to regret becoming a Jew and become back a guy. So the Rabbanan said that he inherits midrabanan. So we see by Yerusha, if they were actually partners, it's also by Yerusha, it's mutter. Next, goy es hager. A goy wants to inherit his father, the ger. So the father, the opposite. The ger es hager, or the ger inheriting his father, the ger. So then there's no mitzvah of inheritance. Not midaraisa, not midarabanan. That's now we learned in the Mishnah. Listen to this Mishnah. Lava mois min a gershnis gayer. You borrowed money from a ger that became a ger. You borrowed money from a ger, and then the ger died. The person that you borrowed the money from died. Now you want to pay the kids? Don't return it to your sons, because when a father and son become gerim, they're not father and son anymore. They're two strangers. So you don't have to return the loan back to the son, because it's not the inheritor of his father, because gershon is gayer kikachon not ludamli. If you actually give the money back to that son, you don't get a pat on the back. The Chachamim don't say they don't say you did something. You should have given it to tzedakah, but you didn't have to do that. Says the Gemara, Vatani, we learned the Brisa Ruach Chachamim Noichemeni. You did a good thing by returning the money that you borrowed to the son of the ger, who is also a ger. So how do you square off the two brises? Like Kash, it's not difficult. If the father and son both became gerim at the same time, so therefore they're considered like two different people, because the ger, the goy, both had their pregnancies and their birth as goyim, and therefore don't return the money. We go to Amid Aleph Yudches. If the ger became a ger and then married a Jewish woman, and maybe his wife became a Gioris also, and now the kid that was born actually was born as a Jew, but the pregnancy while his mother was pregnant with him, he was actually a goy. So there we say that son, even though he's not related to his father, because his father's Gershon is Gaya Kakach and Eiladami, still, when the father dies, return the loan back to that son, because people will see that if you don't return loans back to the kids, they'll say also by a full-fledged Jew, a regular Jew who has a son, a Jew, if you borrow money from the father, you don't have to return it to the son. And that's incorrect. So because it can be confusion, that's why we say in that case where you should return the loan. So that was one source of where we know a goy could inherit his father min Torah. Now the Gemara gives two more sources. Rav Chia bar Avon Rabbi Yochanan, goy yorish is aviv dvar Torah. A goy could inherit his father, and you see that in the Torah. Tiksiv kirushal Esav satis har seir. We see that Esav got an inheritance through his father Yitzchak, the mountain of Seir. So Esav is considered a goy. So therefore, we see the concept of Yerusha by a goy to his father. Frank the Gemara, V'dilma Yisrael B'shumachani. Esav is not really a goy. He's a rebellious kid, a person who left the religion, but he's still considered a Jew. Ella, says the Gemara Mahacha, Kilivnei Loit Desatis Or Yerusha. Loit, who's a complete goy, right? He got Or, the city of Or, as Yerusha, the area called Or. So we see that Loit, the goy, could inherit his father, the goy, as for inheritances. Rav Chia bar Ava, my time lo Rava. Why didn't Rav Chia like Rava's the Chishiv and Kenehu's source as Devar Torah that you can collect? A goy is inheriting his father. Torah doesn't say you should only make the accounting, make up a price with your purchaser, but not with the inheritors of the purchaser. The Torah is not discussing the inheritors. Could be that the inheritors of that the guy inheritors don't even come into the picture. So why didn't Rava use this pasuk in Chumash? It says Loit inherited something. Maybe the answer is because a Loit is the only exception, because he's the nephew of Avram Avinu. The Torah gave him an inheritance, but a regular guy to inherit his father, the guy, maybe there is no source in the Torah for that. So the bottom line is the Gemara had brought different sources, but it's the same idea. A guy, Johnny, could inherit his father Tommy, no problem. Min HaTorah, the Torah has certain halachas for that, and that's not just a Jewish thing, but it could also apply by goyim as well. Torah back to the Ivri. There are certain things that apply by Eved Ivri, but not by Amar Vriya, and the opposite true. The following things apply by Jewish slave. He has a term of 6 years. Uva Yovel Jubilee, he goes free. Uva Misas Aden, if the owner dies. This doesn't, that an Avriya doesn't have these things to them. That doesn't make sense. We'll see in a moment. There's things by an Avriya that don't apply by the Eved Ivri. The Avriya goes out with Simonim. You can't sell an Avriya twice. We can force her to be redeemed against his will. These ideas don't apply by the Eved Ivri. So this is a cryptic brisa, and we're now going to explain every part of the brisa. Amamar yesh be'ivri she'ein be'ivriya. We say that an Ivri has multiple ways to go out free, but they don't apply by Amavriya. What are the multiple ways? Shanim, 6-year term, Yovel, or the Mises Adam, or a Minu. But I'll ask you, Stira, from our Mishnah says that all the things that an Eved Ivri goes out, and Ivriya goes out, and but not only that, Yisera Olav Amavriya, the Amavriya has even an extra way to go out. Shekoinis Asma b'Simanim. She goes out if she brings Simanim. So what do you mean? What did the Brisa mean that these things don't apply by Amavriya? Answers the Gemara, Amar Sheshish Kugoin Shiya'ada. When the master married her, then the only way she can go out is with a get. But she doesn't go out with Shanim, Yovel, Misas Adam. So Gemara says, Yada Pshita, Gita Baya. When he married her, now she requires a get. Why would I think she would go out after 6 years of Yovel? So the Gemara says, Mahu the same. I ever thought Loy Libata Hilkasamina, that the halachas should not be, the fact that yid is like a forced marriage on her. Really, it's not really, we're asking her permission. We're not asking the father's permission if the master should marry her. The Torah says that it's a good idea that if the master or the son of the master decides to marry her, it's a good marriage. It's a good idea. So I would have thought that really all the halachas of Amariya still remain intact. That means after 6 years, she could walk out of the marriage. After Yovel, she could walk out of the marriage. Or if the son married her and the father died, she could go out free. Kamash Malon, once she's married, she needs a gita. If so, why does the Brisa say later on that an Ivriya could go out with Simonim? This is what the Brisa means. If they didn't get married, she goes out with Simonim. The Einim Karas Nishnis, Amavriya, let's say she served out her 6-year term. Let's say she was sold at age 4. At age 10, her term is up. She goes back to her father. Father can't sell her again. And the Torah says so. Michlal, don't you think this implies the Eved Ivri Nimka V'Nishna, that an Eved Ivri that's sold for one term can also be sold again. So that's not, let's say, Machru Bezdin. Let's say a person stole money. So Bezdin sells him as an Eved. And then it seems to imply that if he still owes money, so then the Bezdin can sell him again. Right? That's what you're saying. Only an Amavri is not sold twice, but an Eved Ivri is sold twice. So the question is, Vatanya, we learned in a Brisa, and here's the drasha. Kaven Shinimka Palm Achas, as soon as he sold at one time, for one time, Shuv I Ata Rashay Lemoichrei. He can't sell it. So therefore, let's say Madoff, who stole all this money, so now he can't pay it back, Bezdin will only sell him for a 6-year term, and that's it. So why do you say that? Why did the Brisa seem to imply that at every Ivri he has to continue to be sold until he pays everybody back? Answers the Gemara, Amarava, Loy Kasha, Kam Begneva Achas. If he stole money at one shot and then was caught, so now you're selling him for this one big crime of stealing 50 million, he got sold only one time. But if he made two different types of Genevas, Kam Beshtei Genevas, if he stole in two different situations, two different Ponzi schemes, let's say, then he would be sold for each one individually. Amalei Abaye, so Abaye challenged them. But the word Geneva seems to imply that even if he stole many different times from the same person, that he would still only be sold once. And from the way Rava had it is that if he did two Genevas with one person, you'd be sold two different times. Elam Abaye disagreed with Rava, and he said the same idea, like Kasha, if you stole from one person, so then you only sold one time. So let's say you stole $1 million for one person, he's only sold for one 6-year term. But if he stole from two different people, two different crimes, then he can be sold for each one separately. Tanarabanan. Now the rabbis discuss what is it that you're selling? Geneva Elef. Let's say he stole 1,000, but when you sell him for a 6-year term, he's only worth 500. So he's not paying back the entire amount that he stole. Nimkar, he sold. The chayz of a nimkar, it seems that you could sell him again, but it's not really true. We just got through saying that you only sold once for one particular crime. But gnove chamesh meyas v'shava elef, if you stole 500 and he's worth 1,000, so he stole less than what you're going to sell him for, ein nimka klal, then he's not sold at all. Now, but the Rabbi Lezer is a big chiddush. He says the only time you would sell an eved is only if the amount that he stole and that he can't pay back is equal to the amount of his 6-year term. If the amount that he stole is equal to the amount that he could be sold for nimka, then he sold. The imlav, it's most likely that it's not going to be equal. Ein nimka, he's never sold. Amar Rava said, Rab Lezer seems more correct than the Rabbanim. Let's say you agree that if he stole 500, but he's worth much more than that. He's worth 1,000. The Ein Nimkar, you don't sell him because the Nimka Kule Amar Rachman, the Torah says you sell him in entirely. You can't sell him that for a 6-year term when he only owes half of what he's worth. So Hachiname, let us say the same thing. Nimka B'gnei you can only be sold if you're going to equal to the amount that you stole from Amar Rachmana. You won't be sold if you're only worth half of the Geneva that you stole. So the people will never get paid back. So according to Rab Lezer, a person like Madoff, who stole billions of dollars, right, he won't be sold at all. Because when you're going to sell him, how much is he worth? He's not going to be worth the amount of the 6 year to pay back anybody. So according to Reb Lezer, you wouldn't sell him at all. Chachamim disagree. Anyway, new Gemara. Maftan oisab al karcha. Ama Avriya can force her way to redemption. Stava Rava Lameimar. Rava held bal karcha the Adon. She could go force her way against the will of the Adon by writing to the master. The Amavriya writes to the master, listen, I have no money to pay you. I'm writing you an IOU money that when I get a job, I'm going to pay you back the money that I owe you. Let me go free now. Amalei Abayis. Abayis said, what does that mean? My nihu. She writes the money that she's going to pay them back, the Adon the money. Amai, why should the master take such a thing? Nakib Marganusa bidei. He's holding this diamond in his hand. In other words, he's holding this Amavriya, right? And she's his maid. Yavni Chasma, now she's giving like a phony, uncashable check, saying that someday in the future I'll pay you back what I owe you. No, she doesn't go free like that. What it means, what the Brisa means, that she goes free against his will. Unbelievable. If the father now has money and he shouldn't have sold her to begin with, we force the father to buy her back. Because this caused a defamation to the rest of the family, that they have their sister who's now an Amavriya. The rest of the family can't do a good shidduch. So the Gemara says, if that's the case, Eved Ivri Name, any Eved Ivri that sold himself into a slavery, let's force the rest of the family that if they have enough money, they should be allowed to resell that woman, forced to redeem the woman. And for the Gemara, that if you redeem the Eved Ivri, he's going to resell himself, so there's no gain over there. So the Gemara says, Hachinami, same thing like this. If you force the father to redeem his Amavriya, he's going to resell himself. He's going to resell her. The Gemara, Hakatani ain't in him kares v'shem, but we have a rule that once a father sold his daughter into slavery, into an Amavriya, if he gets back power over her, he cannot resell her. And that's why if the father has enough money, we force him to buy her back, because we're not concerned that he's going to resell her again, because he has no right to resell her again. Another 3 more minutes and then we'll stop. Money, who does our Brisa go like? Rab Shimon, the time we learned in the Brisa, a person could sell his daughter into marriage of Erison, and let's say he gave his daughter into Erison, they didn't get to go to Chuppah yet, and then she got a divorce, or her husband, their future husband, died. V'shayna, he could do it again. The father could do it again if the first marriage didn't work out. The shivches v'shayna, if he could sell her as a maid and repeat it again. If the term of her service was used up and she's still a katana, he can resell her again. Leishas achas shishas, he can sell her into marriage after being a maid. But he can't sell her as a maid once she was married. Rab Shimon says, and this is the Rab Shimon that we're talking about. Just like you can't sell your daughter to be a maid after she was married or she was engaged to somebody. Once she was a maid, you can't resell her as a maid. Because once a father sold his daughter as a maid and she served out her term, even though he has rights to her to get her married, but he can't resell her as a maid. The Tanya we learned in a brisa, because it's really a pasuk. The Torah says a father should not sell his daughter again. He did something to her, and therefore he can't sell her again. We go to Yud Chesam and Beis. Bekivin Shapirish Talosoi Oleha. As soon as the Adon married her, Shuvein Rishar Lamarchet. So the Tanakama Divrei Rabbi Kiva. Kiva says the big ba means that as soon as the father married her, the Adon married her, then if the Adon dies and she goes back to the father, he can't resell her as a maid. So shivchus acher ishus. Divrei Rabbi Kiva. Rabbi Lezer omer b'vigdei ba kiven shebaga ba shiv ein rishar lebachra. Since you sold her once as a maid, if you get back her, she walks back to you because she served out her term, you can't resell her again. But my coming palgi, what's the argument between Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Kiva? Rabbi Lezer sova yesh aim lemesoris. You pay attention to the way the word is written, and the word is written as if it says bevigdoi, as if you rebelled against, like bevogadba, you rebelled against her by selling her as an amma, so you have no right to sell her again. That's what the Chumash is saying. But Rabbi Kiva Sava, yesh ein lemikra, you could look at the way the pasuk is read. The vigdoi sounds like beged. The only problem you lose your right to sell your daughter is only if she got married, but not if she was just a maid again. Rab Shimon Sava yesh ein lemikra le'misaris. You pay both attention to the way the word is spelled, and you also pay attention to how the word sounds. And therefore, according to Rabbi Shimon, once you sold a woman as a shivcha, you cannot resell her as a shivcha. Once she was made yiyud, you can't also sell her as you have both stringencies. You can't resell her. One more minute, and then we'll stop. Boy Rabba Abba Bara Uvua. Yeud. Yeud means, we told you before that when you own an Amma of Riyah, the Torah says you have to marry her. And what you do is you say to the little girl, Harei at miyedesli, you're going to be designated to be my wife. And where's the Kedushin money? Well, I paid it to your father. When I bought you to be in service to me, that will be now turned into Kedushin money. So the question is, does that master now have to pay for a wedding hall and make chuppah? Nisuin oisa, did he make nisuin or erisin oisa, or just got engaged to her? Nafkamina liyarshal tamala hafana dereh. Is she a full-fledged wife where he can inherit her, mimtama to her if he's a kohen, and make for her nadarim? In other words, does he really have to make a chuppah or not? So what is it? What did he accomplish here? My Pashama, come in here. We just learned it. Once by the father, it says he can't resell his daughter because once he gave her over into yid, he can't resell her again. Zabuni hu delay mizabin, he can't resell her according to Rabbi Kiva as a shivcha. Hoyeyud miyayid law, he can actually give her over into marriage to somebody else, right? Vi amrit nisuin oisa. But if you want to say that when the Adon did yield, he actually married her. Wait a second, if that is considered a real full-fledged marriage, and he doesn't have to go to chuppah. Kaven Denisa, since a girl got married into chuppah, shuvein l'rafir shusba, so her father has no jurisdiction over her. Elav shmamina erison. From here, you see that that yud only makes erison, and actually the Adon now has to pay for a wedding hall and hire a band to take this 8-year-old girl into a full-fledged marriage. He's only engaged to her. So that's what the Gemara wanted to prove. Answers the Gemara, and here we'll stop. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. Hacha Kidushin Daf. What the pasuk is saying is not that it's talking. The pasuk is not talking about she actually married the Adon, because maybe when they do yid, it's actually full-fledged nesuin. It's a regular kedushin. V'hachi kamar kevin shemasra avia lemishlis chayav b'sheir ksusav nasa, and the father gave her over into a marriage to a stranger, and who would be eventually become her husband, and that person died. So then, he can't sell her as a maid anymore, but he could actually find another husband for her to take over. So this is where the Gemara is discussing over here, and we'll stop over here. Basically, is when the Adon goes over to this little girl that's working for him and says, "You are miyuad to me. I don't have kedushin money. I gave it to your father." Did they make kedushin, or he's actually marrying her right now as a full-fledged husband and will not have to pay for a chuppah? So you see more about that tomorrow.